Almost, I'm sorry.
And that's the terrible myth of organized society, that everything that's done through the established system is legal. And that word has a powerful psychological impact. It makes people believe that there is an order to life and an order to a system, and that a person that goes through this order and is convicted has gotten all that is due him. And therefore society can turn its conscience off and look to other things and other times. And that's the terrible thing about these past trials, is that they have this aura of legitimacy, this aura of legality. I suspect that better men than the world has known, and more of them, have gone to their death through a legal system than through all the illegalities in the history of man. 6 million people in Europe during the Third Reich, legal. Sacco Vanzetti, quite legal. The Haymarket defendants, legal. The hundreds of rape trials throughout the South, where black men were condemned to death, all legal. Jesus, legal. Socrates, legal. And that is the kaleidoscopic nature of what we live through here and in other places. Because all tyrants learn that it is far better to do this thing through some semblance of legality than to do it without that pretense.
So that was William Kunstler, and I have to thank Randy Credico and my years of working on his show for introducing me to who he was. He was an amazing person, and if you don't know about him, please go look him up. We're going to be talking a bit tonight about some of the things in the Assange case that are being done in court that are anything but legal. So we have a couple of great candidates on. We have Phil Anderson returning from Wisconsin, and we have Jose Vega. If you've been paying any attention, you know who he is, because he's usually shouting someone down with some facts somewhere. And we have a really special guest at the end who I also met while working on Randy's show, and that is Laurel Krauss, sister of Allison Krauss, who was killed at Kent State University in 1970, which was incidentally the year before I was born. So I think it's not an accident that a lot of us don't know a lot about these stories because, you know, the system doesn't really want us to, I think. But anyway, before I move on, I've got another Kunstler clip. Specifically, he's speaking at Kent State in October of 1970, and I got special permission from the Kent State archives to play a bit of it. But before that, I just want to, give a shout out to Randy, who is, let me share here. Okay, it's up here. Randy is out with the billboard truck again. He was all over New York City in the freezing cold, I think during Day X week, and he's been back in DC. There's Gabriel Shipton, and all over the place with this truck in the cold. Here he is outside of the UK embassy, and he's just a tireless activist, and I just have to thank him for everything I've learned on his show. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go into the next Kunstler clip, and he's addressing students at Kent State about 6 months after that happened, and he quotes something from someone else wrote at the time in the New Yorker, and it's really about how power uses the law. And so with that, let me just pull that up. Okay, here we go.
I suppose you all know, of course, that Joseph Rhodes, when he heard about these indictments, called it Mississippi justice, and that's the way it has to be treated. This is an attempt to create a Reichstag fire here on this campus to utilize the old device, which was referred to just a moment ago, of pointing the finger at the victims and trying to pretend that they are not the victims, but they are the victimizers themselves. This was done in Germany 35 years ago with great effect. Out of the firing of that building, that symbolic building, they came the whole Nazi nightmare. And I hope that the same result doesn't come out of the incidents that occurred on this campus last May, and then turning them against the people by these indictments. There will be formed a legal defense fund. It is hopeful that most will cling together and learn that there is a strength in unity that doesn't come when you're all by yourself, bit by bit. That's essentially what is desired. Different defenses, different attacks, everybody out to save himself from an indictment, rather than an attempt to get together and save yourselves, of course, but to save the whole academic community as well. And that goes way beyond Kent State. For those of you that haven't read an article in the New Yorker called The Greening of America by Charles Reich, he says the law is not the law, that the law is utilized by those in power to control those who have no power. That the law is used to force an allegiance to a corporate state, which he says has no longer any excuse for existing because it's not fulfilling the needs and desires of people.
And so I showed that to kind of, illustrate how we're all kind of like expecting that there's been a lot of analysis of what's gone on in the court in the Assange recent hearing, and like, oh, it's looking better. And, there are all these things that have happened, between the, violation of the attorney-client privilege in this case, and the CIA attempts to assassinate him, and all these things that we think the court should recognize and really throw it out, right? But it's really, the question is, who are they really answering to? And so on that note, I've got one more clip from, and this is Ray McGovern on Randy's show on Friday, speaking about who these judges really answer to. So we'll do that, and then we'll launch into the candidates, what they have to say about that.
They are not the last resort here. They report to what's become of the jurisprudence of the British. Now, the question is whether the British are willing to bow to power rather than to law. It was Chris Hedges at one of these discussions who said, this is not about law. This is about power. And it's about the power of the United States. And it's not even about the power of the president. It's about the power of the deep state, of the people who were justly exposed in this proceeding, the CIA in the first instance, snooping on Julian's lawyers and his friends and his journalists, for God's sake, 4 of whom were American citizens and protected by the Fourth Amendment. So what happens here will all depend on how subservient the British authorities, who will have the last say, in my opinion, as to what the Lord and the Lady decide to do. And my bleak prediction is simply that they will take measures to delay and delay and delay. There will be months and months and months aimed at telling Julian, who will keep resisting, of course, but they want to tell Julian, look, Mr. Assange, will you please do us a favor and die in prison? That's what they want. They don't want Julian back in the United States. My God, that would be a horrendous thing for Biden. We still do have a First Amendment, hanging judges to be sure, but a First Amendment. Does he want that in a year in which he's pursuing re-election, old as he is? I don't think so. So my bleak prediction is that month after month after month, at least through November, we will see Julian cooped up with a great wish on the part of the British authorities that they would get rid of this upstart, as has happened to the former British British history. Rid me of this person. And my God, let's hope and pray that they do not succeed. Let's hope and pray against hope that this lord and this lady can stay human enough to protest when they're told by MI6 and by Rishi Sunak that they have to decide to keep Julian in prison forever.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
I
not.
think we talked about that last week, actually.
The MI6.
Well, the idea that they'd be perfectly happy for him to die in prison. Yeah. That's probably the best outcome for the United States government. So they never have to face having to answer for the injustice that would be if they actually extradited him here and had some sort of show trial.
Right.
Right.
Well, what do you guys think about
right? The chill it would put on everybody if they did that. That's your punishment if you don't conform and be an ordinary journalist.
And what do you guys think about the whole, the way it's tied up in the courts? Anyone that's ever had anything in the court system, I know, Matt, your election, when you were running, you did. We talked about this before too, I think, but the process is the punishment. And here we are hanging on, waiting for justice to be done through the courts. Just seems to me that we have to start banding together, like Kunstler said in that clip, and maybe start fighting these battles back in the court system. But of course, that's very expensive, and that is a huge barrier. No matter what the battle is, it costs so much money to do that. What do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, we have the National Lawyers Guild, I think, that was started. I don't know that much about it, but there's some help for fighting. But what do we do? What do we do about that? Any ideas?
Yeah, well, I think you take what's going on with Gaza right now, and you take the fact that because of the protests that have been happening around the world, that is actually what has allowed South Africa to take this case to the International Court of Justice. If it wasn't for the global pressure around the world, there would not be an ICJ case. But the law can only take you so far because, as several people have noted, the ICJ, does not necessarily have the authority, or it does have the authority, but it can't really enforce the authority to force Israel to comply with their provisional rulings in the meanwhile, while they figure out whether or not there is genocide going on. I know they ruled that there is a plausible reality that there is a genocide going on. But none of that would have happened without the public pressure around the world. And so I think these things kind of have to work hand in hand. Yes, you do fight the legal battles, but if you don't have the global pressure, or just the people who are on the ground, activists, lobbying politicians, lobbying the people who have some kind of sway, the activists, the legal side just completely falls apart because the law is not on your side. There's no such thing as something that exists above us, like as if the law is some divine, these are just rules written by people, enforced by people who, whether or not they want to admit it, are just the kind of people who are enforcing the laws against Julian Assange right now are not just nor right in what they're doing. And the law is not being used here to help Julian Assange, which it should be. It's being used to punish him. So if you don't have the activism, it falls apart. As for fighting it back in the legal, yeah, I think you try all avenues that you can, and then you have to back it up with what's going on in the streets. What people are doing day in and day out, working tirelessly, activism and awareness to what's going on with Assange.
Yeah, I would agree. You mentioned the law. When the Constitution was originally written, the idea, at least at the time, was that the law had to start with what rights people have just as being human beings, and then government should be restrained by not being allowed to infringe on those. And as we've seen over at least the last 100 years or so, the government itself is now fighting against our constitutional rights to know what our government is doing, to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the law is now being weaponized against us, as opposed to being something that originally was written to defend us against situations like this. I think it's worth, I just want to point something out too. When William Kunstler was talking, it just so happened that I found on Netflix last Friday night a movie called The Trial of the Chicago Seven, which is about him defending seven people. The eighth that was on trial was Bobby Seale, not represented by Mr. Kunstler, but that were basically, a conspiracy to commit violence, a federal crime that was never true by the federal DOJ that just wanted to push back and chill the war protests that were going on in '68 at the Democratic National Convention and in other places. So it's a smaller scale than what's going on now, but it really dramatically illustrates it. And the facts as portrayed in that movie are accurate. So if any of our listeners want to watch that, I think I would suggest watching it as a dramatization of exactly how the law can be turned against people's rights in a way that is attempting to chill real protest, people having real information and acting on the truth about what their government is doing.
Yeah, and I would just follow up by saying, I think the law, is flawed within itself. I mean, you're coming at it from the right angle, that the Constitution says, no, you have intrinsic rights just by the very basis of being a human being. You have these rights, and of course, it's the amendments, the Bill of Rights, and stuff. And now, as you said, yes, it is being weaponized, but ultimately, what it is, it's just that the people have to decide to be the law. That's what it is, right? And I think if the people, this is the whole idea about the people being this fourth branch of government, because I think if the people don't actually decide that they want to be the enforcers of what is just and right, because often what is just and right does not exist in laws, right? The law is what's being used against Julian Assange right now, but reason and mercy, as Assange himself, by the way, when he wrote that letter to King Charles asking him to come visit the prison, right? He was asking him to just come and look, and it wouldn't hurt you to have a little mercy on the way you treat these prisoners, right? It just, the people have to decide to be the law, and the people have to decide to be the government that enforces that law. And well, what you have right now is Plato says this in the Republic. He says that the punishment for having a bad governor is a bad society. Because if people don't actually upkeep their government, if people don't actually check in on their government, they deserve what they get. So I think
couldn't agree more. And one of the interesting concepts that I think that exists in law is actually in the Constitution, but the legal system, and in particular the judicial system pushes against this, is the idea of jury nullification. That's right in the Constitution. And the idea is that if a jury is, sitting in, involved in a trial, and they decide that regardless of the fact that the person that is on trial might have actually done the deed, that if the law is unjust, they can find that person not guilty by virtue of the law being unjust. And that's something that that judges and courtrooms and all over the country suppress that information. And in fact, have thrown people in jail for even on public property outside of courtrooms passing out pamphlets about jury nullification. So that's that issue there. It illustrates the conflict that you're talking about. The people are the law. The people delegate their rights to government to be governed. And once they decide they don't want to delegate them anymore, they shouldn't have to be ruled by those laws or by those bad governors, as you mentioned. But as Mr. Kunstler said, there's definitely a difference between what the law is and what is moral. The law is really just about compliance, and that's it. It's not about right or wrong. Being moral is whether you decide to follow a law or not, based on the merits of the law, based on our understanding of what's true and right and honest for the ways that people live together, choose to live together voluntarily. And once laws go beyond that, like the drug war does, among other things, then that should be something where juries step up and nullify it, and people vote those politicians out. But I think a lot of people confuse legal with moral at their own expense.
Do you guys know, there's one other thing I left out when I was talking about there are so many things with the Assange case that aren't right or shouldn't be legal. Have you guys heard about the Operation Pelican, which was basically when they pulled him out of the embassy. Maybe you've heard it called that, but our star that Meltzer, I've got another Meltzer clip here, but he talks about what happened right before he was pulled out. So this was something this was again from Assange Countdown to Freedom, but I haven't heard it talked about as much as some of the other aspects.
It was in the last days of March 2019 when his lawyers came back to me and decided to release a press release on the 5th of April. So this is, 6 days before he was expelled from the embassy. And I called on the UK and on Ecuador not to expel him, and in the UK not to arrest him, and certainly not to send him to the US. I said, freeze the situation. I'm coming to London. I want to investigate the situation while he is still in the embassy. That was the 5th of April, on Friday evening. I sent out the letters on Monday morning, the 8th of April, to make sure I could visit him on the 25th of April in the Ecuadorian embassy. That was the 8th. The 10th of April, which is 2 days later, and 1 day before his expulsion, the British ambassador writes a letter to me saying, this whole story about his expulsion is completely hypothetical. We cannot discuss this with you. Obviously, you can visit him in the embassy whenever you want, but we cannot discuss it with US British authorities. Within 24 hours, the same British authorities arrested him. And clearly they knew about this before, because we know now from the diary in the thick of Alan Duncan, who was just published in this book, I think In the Thick of It it's called, his biography. Alan Duncan was the minister in charge for that operation, Operation Pelican, which was his arrest in the embassy. And this had been planned already for the 9th of January 2019. So this had been planned for months ahead. But a day before, the British authorities basically lied to me that this is completely hypothetical. And I'm not, some, average journalist. I'm a mandated UN mandate holder. I'm supposed to be able to have a privileged communication with the government. So they clearly lied to me that within 24 hours he was expelled. And when I saw that, I said, there's something wrong. I mean, I officially asked them to freeze this. He's been there for almost 7 years. They can wait for another 10 days. That's not the problem. So if they have to weasel him out so quickly, it's because I have announced that I want to investigate it. They want to get him out before I come to London. So to have have facts on the ground before I can come and basically stop it, you see? And so I'm convinced that I actually accelerated the process by announcing my visit.
Wow.
But then I turned suspicious. I said, well, if this is how you're dealing with me, then something must be really fishy in this case.
Wow.
I mean, what do we do with that? What were the repercussions of that happening? Like Neil said, wasn't just an average journalist or somebody random coming to visit him. I mean, it's things like that just, I don't know, they're just shocking that they've gone on and continue.
I think we can draw some conclusions from that. And the conclusions I would gather is that nothing is so fearful to almost every politician and government official in the United States and in Britain and in other parts of the world, Western Europe, etc. Nothing is so fearful as the wrath of the U.S. military and the U.S. intelligence agencies and the CIA, that they will break laws, that they will ignore the UN, that they will bend rules, that they will do whatever to avoid the wrath or the repercussions of not cooperating with the CIA and with the United States intelligence agencies. Clearly.
Matt, did you want to?
Last week, I think we talked about this last week. Ambassador Craig Murray, who very much involved with this trial, he was present there last week for hearings. He's been at other hearings. He's such a great spokesperson for the Assange family. But Ambassador Murray talked about the connection between the judges, the sitting and previous governments, as well as security service. And one of the two judges last week, if people don't know, had actually been a barrister, had represented MI6, the British intelligence service. The other judge, Judge Sharp, that was Judge Johnson. The other judge, Judge Sharp, had similar type of relationships with the government, including having a brother who had extended an 800,000 pound loan to Boris Johnson, and then been appointed the chair of the BBC. I mean, so that's just the two judges that Julian was in front of. Well, Julian wasn't in front, of course, because he was too unwell to be present. But those are the two judges presiding last week. And what you're seeing with this is you're seeing the establishment, the elites, in this case, whether it's the high legal, the judiciary, the prime ministers and the ministers of the government and the security service, how they link arms. And so I'm sitting here listening to you guys, and what a fantastic conversation this is. And I'm going to shut my mouth in a minute and go back to listen to you all. But where you're coming from, though, as you approach the system as outsiders, right? Neither one of you are with the Republican or Democratic Party. Both of you are coming in a manner that the system, the elites, the establishment, the empire sees as a threat. And so as you all are running, I'd like to hear some of the experiences you've had being this outsider, being this threat, being this, danger that our system goes through great lengths to suppress.
Well, for one, just being an independent candidate, because there's 203 pages in the FEC rulebook, and I only found this out like a couple weeks ago. Thankfully, we didn't have payroll set up yet, but one of the rules is that you can't pay yourself more than what you made last year in gross taxes. I only made like $22,000 in taxes, and then so I work part-time, right? I have to work part-time while running my campaign in order to do this. Now, I can give you a more specific story about the law, which is that when I confronted Hakeem Jeffries back in February of last year, after I confronted Hakeem Jeffries, I got a call from DC Capitol Police asking me if my intention was to hurt the congressman, if my intention was, if I was going to do anything, if I was going to approach the congressman and hurt him physically. And all I asked back, you never say anything to those folks, but all I asked was, how did you get my number? And she responded by saying, well, you're everywhere now. You may want to look into that. And I was like, what are you trying to tell me?
My God.
What the
Jose, that's something we've talked about before as well, this intersection of the Assange case as a First Amendment case with concurrently running in parallel this assault on our Fourth Amendment. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to think that I could hide things from the government, and then, if you think of all the ways that our information can leak out, or just communications with other people that aren't trying to hide, et cetera, or if you're in public running for office, right, Jose, you're automatically, giving information to somebody at the government level, and that's all public information. So it's really, really hard to hide from all that. What I run into in talking about these things with people is kind of two different things, and they do overlap. One is that people have a hard time believing it if you go too fast and lay out the whole thing for them, like what you just said, Matthew, a First Amendment assault concurrent with a Fourth Amendment assault. That's a lot for people to take in, and most people in the United States are comfortable in their lives to a certain extent, are not hungry, are not desperate for entertainment or to take on things that seem too challenging, like a vastly different understanding of what their government is doing. So you have to give it to them a little bit at a time and let them kind of find their own way in. And that's what I've been trying to do with this particular situation, because, as we've all acknowledged, this situation with Julian and the First Amendment leads in all directions to what the government does, with war, with lying, with conspiracies, with et cetera, the influence all over the world. And the other part of it is talking to people that have kind of embraced part of it anyway, at least understanding, and the challenge of trying to pry them away from their previous commitments to Democrats and Republicans, whether as parties or candidates. And the process, what usually happens in my experience is they'll be very sympathetic at first, but at some point they will go back to their own parties of previous preference. I didn't mean to make that sound like Dr. Seuss. Their own, what they used to belong to or how they used to identify. And that's where they, we see polling for, I've been through this, other independent and libertarian candidates have been through it, where when polling starts a few months before an election, we do really well. And then as we get closer to election time, people start filtering back to their previous positions. We manage to retain some, but they feel comfortable in what they used to believe or their previous beliefs or prejudices, or they just want to win and they get caught up into the lesser of two evils or whatever. And so we end up fighting to a certain extent, fighting the same battle of getting this information out and hoping to find people who care about these issues as deeply as we do and as deeply as they probably should every election cycle. And the goal is to, it's like waves. You try to get as many people involved and informed as you can through one election cycle, and then hopefully don't lose them at election time, and then start over again and don't give up, whether it's us or other candidates. To just keep fighting, because more and more people will realize what's going on. We just can't lose them back into sort of a anesthetized life, or continuing to align with the very powers that have caused this problem in the first place.
Well, that's why
you mentioned.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Jose.
No, I thought about that, Phil, and one of our campaign ideas, people in my team were not happy with that we have slogans, so I'm calling them ideas. Is vote Vega, elect yourself. And we've started this campaign in the Bronx for my campaign. We're calling guerrilla warfare for truth in the Bronx. And so I've been using a lot of the funds that have been coming in to just like mass print stickers and flyers and posters that just say the truth defies silence. I don't know. I'm a horrible candidate. I don't even have my literature to just like show off, but we have these stickers that we are trying to get posted everywhere. But beyond that, I'm encouraging people not to, I'm not your typical candidate who's, trying to, I guess it's a disgusting thing, right? With the Democrats and the Republicans, where it's like, oh, vote for me because I'll get on my knees better and faster than the other guy. And then the Republican says, no, I'm a better kisser than the other guy. You should vote for me. That guy sucks, right? It's prostitution. It's prostitution. That's what it is.
Exactly.
No part in that at all. Yep. I want to inspire people to not have to wait for elections. It's kind of paradoxical because I'm a candidate, but nobody elected me to go and yell at politicians and, start talking the truth. You don't have to be elected to tell the truth. You don't have to be elected to go and take some direct action or take some nonviolent direct action. You don't have to be elected to do something. That's what my campaign is centered around right now. It's like, don't wait, just do. That's my thing, right? So come November, I'm not promising people a win. Some people are like, no, it can totally happen. All right, well, I'll let them say that. I'm not going to say that. But, I want to inspire people to do right now. Don't help me win. Help me get Assange out of jail. That's my campaign.
Well, it can happen. I think, Phil, you mentioned on another one of these that, that was an idea that was planted really by the government originally, that there are only two parties.
Absolutely.
But, we have just in the 2020 election, which had one of the biggest turnouts ever, there were still 80 million people that didn't vote. 80 million. So, if some of these people, and most of the reasons they don't vote are they don't think it makes a difference, or, they're not paying attention because they don't think it makes a difference. So I always see that it seems to me like candidates like you guys are the ones that can break through because you're speaking truth and people are responding to that. So I think we just have to break that narrative that you can't win. So I think you absolutely can.
Well, and in the context of a campaign, more people pay attention to politics during campaign season too. So that's why I would guess that's why Jose's doing what he's doing, is because, it's not easy to get attention and have influence as an activist outside of the idea that you're running for something. So that, I think that's a useful way to do it, even if your goal isn't to necessarily win, or that's not your only goal or your primary goal. It's the same with me. I want issues to get discussed. I want to wag the dog, so to speak. And if as what happened in 2016 when I ran, I was polling well enough that both the Democrat and Republican that I were running against had to answer some questions that they wouldn't normally have had to answer, and make some commitments that they had to make too. So that at least is useful, I think. If our goal is for, in my case, liberty, freedom for whoever, whatever your goals are as an activist, you can, to a certain extent, wag the dog, because it's for the two parties, to them, it's a zero-sum game for votes.
Well, I would disagree just on that one thing, that like, as an activist, I've gotten millions of views, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I really am not.
Yeah.
I've got, millions and millions of views, and my interventions have been translated into like different languages. And again, this is not me stroking my own ego. It's just that I think people are just hungry for the truth, and are hungry for somebody speaking up and telling the truth. And so whenever anyone's like, well, how do you do it? What do we, you can do it too. Like, I'm just, I think people should just do these things. I think that, I don't know. I think, well, the AOC one went viral in October of 2022, like less than 4 weeks before the elections. That's true. But the ones I did in 2023 was in an off year. There were no elections going on, and that was the ones that had the most potent reactions. So, I think running for Congress has only kind of like elevated me now to another status, which that is true. Right now I have to watch my words, and I can't say so many F-bombs anymore as I used to, which, like,
well, I'll tell a story about that. Actually, earlier today, my Republican opponent, who originally is from Wisconsin but has lived in California for a long time, so the Democrats are saying that he's not really a Wisconsinite anymore. So he got into Lake Mendota just this afternoon. It's very cold. There's still a little bit of ice on it. He had to break through the ice to show that he's really from Wisconsin, which I thought was really, really goofy. And so on Twitter, I kind of called him out, made a little bit of fun, not too dirty or anything, but just kind of laughed at it. And one of our guests last week, Kat, responded to me on Twitter saying, do you, or should you be, spending your time on social media, discussing this and not more important issues? And my response was, well, I'm also discussing important issues, but certainly as a candidate, you're held to a higher standard of discourse, which I don't, in my heart, I'm a bomb thrower. I'd rather call them out and speak the truth in using expletives when appropriate and if necessary. But the public always doesn't look at it favorably, including other candidates, I guess.
I'm really bad.
Isn't that such a I don't know, a contradiction? You can't drop F-bombs, but you can vote to drop lots of other bombs,
Yeah. Somehow we'll offend people that are mass killing people all over the world with our tax dollars in our name, and yet somehow we have to be careful about how we talk to them.
As long as you do that politely.
I'm really getting fired up now. I'll stop and let somebody else talk. But that really disgusts me, what our government does. I'm sure it does all of you too. And so I think it's
well, part of what
I was going to say, Veterans for Peace did a great action, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so ago in DC. People remember the museum where that is, looking down Pennsylvania Avenue, right in front of the Capitol, about halfway in between the Capitol building and the White House was the museum. And they got up on the roof and they dropped the giant banner from the museum that said, "Mr. President, end this fucking war." And then it had as an asterisk, as a foot, the war is the obscenity.
Yes.
And right, that's what we're up against here. We're up against this manufactured, these manufactured narratives, these false hierarchies, or these this necessity to adhere to some type of Manichaean narrative of good versus evil all the time.
It's a false civility. Right.
Yeah. And so there's two things, right? What they don't want is they don't want the truth. They don't want people, truth tellers like Julian Assange or Daniel Hale or Thomas Drake or Chelsea Manning. They don't want that, but they also don't want the complexity. And so that's what you see a lot of times with independent politics, is that you have people not just speaking the truth, speaking about things that are very dangerous to the big donors for the Democratic and Republican parties, but also, too, they're bringing a complexity. They're bringing another way. They're bringing an alternative that the system just abhors.
Well, and I think also when you're speaking up, I mean, what's the common denominator with all those people you mentioned? You're speaking up against war. And that brings me into, we'll bring on our next guest. I've got 2 clips I want to play.
No, what happened?
I don't know. Kelly may have just logged herself out, possibly.
No, I don't know what happened. I did not.
Back.
I did not. The screen went, so I don't know. Anyway, I'm back. So here we go. We've got a 1.5-minute clip and a 50-second clip, and then we'll bring Laurel in. So this is about Kent State, and this is a little clip. It's from CNN, I think about 10 years ago, and they were trying to have, maybe Laurel can talk about it a little bit more, but they were trying to get the Justice Department, I guess, to look into the audio from Kent State that day, May 4th, 1970. But here it is.
This iconic image is synonymous with America's internal battle over the Vietnam War. Tear gas and bullets at Kent State University. 4 students were killed, 9 others injured when Ohio National Guardsmen opened fire during an anti-war protest. The Justice Department now reveals the FBI destroyed an original reel-to-reel recording of the shooting. But a digitally enhanced review of a copy of those tapes has revived the question. Audio engineer Stuart Allen analyzed the tape for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He claims the fatal volley was preceded by 4 shots from an unknown source.
4th gunshot, most important, here's the echo from it.
70 seconds later, Stewart says there's a command to fire, followed by 67 gunshots. The Justice Department calls its own review of the words and sounds unintelligible with no consensus. Allen says this isn't about prosecuting anyone in the National Guard.
So this next clip, I just happened upon this, and I was just kind of shocked at this one little bit of this interview. A local news guy is interviewing Sandy Scheuer's father, who was another one of the students that was killed. And this is just a little 50-second snippet. But notice what the news guy does. I want to see if you guys, I'm sure you'll pick up on this.
Yes, my feelings changed. My feelings changed about the war. My feelings changed about the system of, not the system, the government we have. It's not 100% democratic. Because a minority can't express their views. My opinion changed about the newspapers, which do not bring everything the way they should.
There's no question that you have a right to be bitter at this point. And I don't want to sound cruel or add any cruelty to what you've already experienced, but do you think that you could become overwhelmed with hate and with bitterness and eventually not be able to function in the way you want?
Because you're nervous and so on, but I'll try, and I think I became a better person really through that.
I just was shocked by that, because it's like gaslighting him or something. To me, I just thought, here's this news person, we think of a lot of the media as representing the state, and it's like, don't be bitter. Your daughter was just murdered. I mean, I don't know. I was just shocked by that. But I'm going to bring Laurel in now. I
Hi.
will.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes.
Awesome.
So I wondered if you
I've
could.
never seen that clip.
Oh, you haven't seen that one?
No.
Oh, did you know, or did you ever? You must have met him, maybe.
Oh, yes, certainly. They were Holocaust survivors, Sandy's parents.
Oh, wow.
So it was a kind of a little bit different in terms of their response from the other three families. They had a lot more mitigated response because they had been through the Holocaust, and we didn't really speak up during the Holocaust either.
Right. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about what we spoke about on the phone a little, which was where I found that CNN clip. It was talking about how you took it to, was it the Court of Human Rights? Let me get my page up. And it was kind of acknowledged.
Sure. Well, you saw the recording that with Stuart Allen, analyzing it. He's a forensic expert. And he actually unearthed the Kent State commands to fire, which were in dispute for 40 years. And on the 40th anniversary in 2010, this came out. It was on the anniversary. And what we learned was that there was a command to fire, and preceding the command to fire, that there were 4 shots, and that was done by an agent provocateur who was working for the FBI. When that came out, it was like they would not touch it. It was very hard to get attention on any of it. And I then decided to take it to The Hague. That was my first choice. And they don't have the correct purview because of the Rome statute there. It starts in 2002, I believe, and Kent State happened May 4, 1970. And so then I took it to the UN, before the UN Human Rights Committee, and that was in 2014. And I asked them to examine the human rights that were involved in the Kent State massacre, because you saw that news person talk, and he was not wanting to talk about what happened. He wanted to talk about how devastating it was. And that's the smokescreen.
Right.
And we took it to the UN, and they admitted it was killing and murder, which was wonderful. The U.S. Department of Justice did. It was a big deal. But now that they've admitted, they can say that they admitted it. They still don't have to do anything about it. They can act like it's such a big deal for them to say those words.
Wow. Well, I know you've been very active for a long time. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Allison Center for Peace?
Well, first we started the Kent State Truth Tribunal. You see our logo there. That is a bullet hole with flowers coming out, because the day before Allison was killed, she said, "What's the matter with peace? Flowers are better than bullets." And we started the Kent State Truth Tribunal on the 40th anniversary, just before the commands to fire showed up. I did it with Emily Kunstler, the daughter of William Kunstler. She's an extraordinary film, social justice documentary maker. And she co-founded Kent State Truth Tribunal with me. And we collected 75 original participants and witness testimonies from people who were there that day. And we filmed them. And we have the archive of that. Lots of gems of real truth that have never been revealed. The people who were shot at have never been able to really share this with the public. There's a little bit at Kent State University that you can go look at that's just recently showed up, but this is just an example of all these kind of events that happen. Horrible thing happens, the government acts wrong, and then basically we're not allowed to examine it at all. And the people that are involved with it, that were harmed by it, they're thwarted in any possible way from getting to the truth. And since day one, I was 15 when it happened. Allison was my older sister. She was 19. I was in junior high. I remember going to the shooting site with my family because we fought it in the courts. My father led the team, Arthur Krause. We would go to Kent State University to take a look at something, and we would always hear click, 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 but we couldn't see the cameras. That was back in 1970. So ever since 1970, I'm a persona non grata in America. You know, they have the right to chase me and harass me and thwart me. I mean, but I'm here to tell you, I'm not the only one. Anyone that has this kind of stuff happen and they want the truth, they become the target.
Yeah, I have, let's see, sorry, when I left a minute, it lost my photos here, but this is your sister.
Yes, that's her high school picture. She wouldn't like that so much.
Oh, really? Oh, right. Okay. And this picture is just so
That's
haunting.
her father on the killing site where she died.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's in a parking lot. So now they've actually, they don't let people park on it. But I mean, that was a big struggle to get that. I mean, it's never been, you know, let's help these people and let's get down to what really happened and let's not ever have this happen again. Absolutely. It's the opposite of that. It's let's figure out how, you know, we can normalize this and people can learn to accept it. And now look at where we are. Look at where we are.
Yeah, I think I told you on the phone too. I talked to one of our original candidates for Assange on the panel that we did, 5 years ago, Paul Knupp. I think he's in Iowa or somewhere out west. And he, I think, was maybe about your age when it happened. And I remember asking him, I just said, you know, well, what happened? Why did all this, you know, activism and everything kind of just die down? And he said something along the lines of, you know, all the assassinations, everything that was happening, that it just really killed everyone's spirit and people kind of just retreated in. And my feeling is that like now we have a lot better way to connect with each other, whether the powers that be like it or not. You know, we can do this, at least for now.
They make sure that we don't come together. And after the Kent State massacre happened, there was Jackson State 11 days later, and they got 2 Black students. And very few people remember or know about that. It's not covered. But it's my feeling that they were 2 actions that were both perpetrated by COINTELPRO, the Chaos Program. But they basically make it so that you can't pursue the truth. And the FBI showed up at all those students' houses for the next 10 years. Everyone was treated like dogs. Anyone that raised their head and said that they wanted, you know, find out what really happened that day, they made sure that they were met with force. And that, you know, you sure you want to do that? You sure you want to ruin your life? You know? And that's the truth of what happened. There was this chilling effect. You know, at the time of the Kent State massacre, they were basically saying, you know, everyone that was in the radical movement, they thought that, you know, J. Edgar Hoover was in their mailbox, and he was. I mean, that's how they spied then. You know, no social media. And so basically everyone felt like they were coming, and they were coming after everybody. There was the draft. There was all this stuff where they were in everyone's personal lives and they were threatening everybody. And we were obstinate. You know, we were a different generation. We would not, but they had to shoot at us to get us to finally shut down.
But you mentioned like your parents' generation, though, what you met with like at school and what your generation dealt with the parents kind of cracking down, like, you know, don't be a problem. There was that issue too. I feel like maybe hopefully that's different now.
You know, it's, you know, I had some dinner with some folks last night, and, you know, it's about everyone having the same opinions, and they want everyone to think the same way. And so, you know, I'm sitting across some people, one I had never known and an old friend. And I said, so what do you think about, we just had a big victory in my community. We got the ceasefire proclamation signed by the city council. And I helped lead that with the Allison Center for Peace, which is a project that I'm working on here in Mendocino, California, to create a memorial for the Kent State and Jackson State massacres. I'd like to actually have a public memorial and not wait for them to do it. But anyhow, we did that. And so I'm sitting at dinner and I said, so what do you know, the news is we did this proclamation and we got, ceasefire, the whole town. It's a small town, but it was wonderful to join in around the world. And the people that I was talking to like looked dead and with scowls on their face. They said, what about Hamas? And it's like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that smoke screen that they put up where people can't think through? I mean, it was the same thing with Kent State. When we get to the hospital, they said they should have shot more. I mean, it's really that way in America. But still, I mean, that they don't think that a genocide is on a completely different scale than what Hamas did.
Anybody jump in?
Setting aside the fact that Hamas was elected in 2006 with the support of the Israeli government and only with like 42% of the vote. And so Americans still want to hold all of that accountable to an election that was now 18 years ago and not really legitimate, not unpolluted by Israeli influence.
It's like gobbledygook, they're fed this stuff. And how are they supposed to make sense is the question. How are they supposed to, what sources do they have? I'm lucky. I know where to go. Cy Hirsch, he's my guy.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I know where to go. I got Aaron Mate and I got Randy Credico and I know where to go. I'm lucky. I'm really lucky because I think that there's a lot of misguided people out there. And it's just, and that's how they did Kent State. They would say one truth. I mean, they would say one thing and then they would say the opposite of it. So here we are 50 years later. There's no way to know what really happened because they published it with all the facts and it's a lot of non-facts too.
Well, my theory is, and I believe this wholeheartedly, I'll defend it forever and ever, is that people would rather be comfortable in whatever their belief or worldview is now than to have it upset, even if what's upsetting their worldview is the truth, because they'd rather just be left alone in whatever combination of truth or fantasy land they're living in.
It's like it keeps them warm or something,
It identifies who they are. So being an American is supposed to mean something to most people, right? We stand for, all this propaganda, right? We stand for truth and justice and spreading democracy, and people's identity and self-esteem comes from that, really. And that's why they keep parading it out after sporting events and whatever, and
the Pledge of Allegiance, I had to do that at the city council.
Exactly.
And
this idea
I couldn't do it. Ever since Allison, I'm not doing that.
This idea that being proud of being an American is very important to a lot of Americans, and in their self-identification as being something special or good or honorable or whatever. And so when we tell all of us, as we do in our different ways on different topics, tell people that that's not true, their first instinct is to completely disregard it and find a reason to disregard it. We're conspiracy theorists, we're communists, we're pro-Putin, we're pro-Hamas, whatever. That's their first reaction, is to reject it on the sketchiest of grounds.
And to make you wrong and to character assassinate ad hominem. It was wild these days.
Yep.
I just want to put in one piece. Jose Vega, I'm a big fan. I just love what you do. The first time I heard you, I said, "Who's that? Who is that?" And you're so well spoken. You really know what you want to say. I'm just so jealous, actually. You're the best. Keep doing it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I never know how to respond to that. You're an interventionist and you've been doing this a lot longer than I've been. So if anything, I should be the one here, fawning over you.
No. I mean, my sister died when I was 15. I had a life, and I picked it up again in 2010. So it's been 15 years that I've been doing this, and it's because I can afford to do it. I'm not really, of course, but I don't have to work for the man so much anymore, and I can just, figure out a way to make this happen. But we need so many more of people. I hope, Phil, I'm sorry that I'm not fawning over you in the same way.
That's right. I don't do what Jose does. He deserves all the credit. He's out there every day.
No,
You
I
sure do,
actually
buddy.
wanted to respond to your point about America. I am not this old, but I think it was Bob Dylan or somebody else in the 60s. Because of Kent State, they started saying, well, where is America? Right? Because it was what Phil said, right? That people have this image of, being patriotic and being an American, honorable, honest, this and that. But like, where is that America? Was that Bob Dylan? I don't remember. I not that I was there to remember. I'm not a vampire or something, but it was somebody who prominent who said that this idea of like, well, this so-called America that's so great, I don't see it. And yeah, I believe that today, right? Like, I like to, I guess the perspective. I'm sorry for all this noise in the background. It's my cat is just dropping stuff in my room. I'm sorry for, I'm 25 years old, so I was born in 1998, and at the age of like almost 3, 9/11 happened, and I was born into this, post surveillance fascist world, right? That is my idea of America. But
Oh my God.
that is not what America actually is. I mean, this is fascism. This is not, the founding fathers had their flaws, of course, but they gave us a constitution. I mean, I think we should use that, When I think about Douglas, I mean, Frederick Douglass was very much a federalist. And he had this idea, because this is where he split with John Brown. I think John Brown even asked Douglas to go with him. And Douglas's whole idea was that, no, we have a constitution. It wasn't the danger or the fear. It was this idea that we have a constitution and we should use it and we should enforce it. That's my America. That's the idea that exists of America in my mind. And until we go back to that, we don't live in America. We live in something else. We live in fascism. So,
well,
that's why
Agreed.
That's where grassroots really count. And so this thing that we did just this last Monday, we had a grassroots action. We joined many other communities around the world in doing a symbolic ceasefire to stop the bombing, to stop the genocide in Gaza, and also to stop the funding to Israel. That was part of our ceasefire proclamation, which I was really pleased to. I canvassed for it. I protested on the streets for it, and I signed it. And I felt really good about it. And it really reignited something in me, which is peaceful action really does heal. It's about the best healer that's out there. When you're doing your protest and you're out there, Jose, you've got to be healing all the angst that you got and getting it out and making it, better connected in your spirit, because that's how you do it. You take action. Healing is an action. It's peace. When you thread it and you make it a peaceful action, then you can heal like never before.
So do you think we had last week, wasn't that last week that Ann Batiza was on? And they had this ceasefire, they in Milwaukee, they pushed it through, and they ended up getting the Milwaukee Democratic Party voting 33 yes, 9 no to signing the House resolution, or stating that they were for House Resolution 934 to drop charges against Assange. So that was really interesting to see the way that they part of the activist group she was part of. They were able, with all that pressure, to sort of tie those things together. So that was, I think, a big victory.
I think the key to the future is grassroots action. It's the only thing that, and there's so many more of us than them.
That's right. And that's my idea with doing this again. I will say that I am having a lot harder time finding candidates. There are some really great ones out there, like you guys. and the ones we've had on, but it is more polarized than ever. The Republicans are not your average fiscally conservative, socially liberal. I mean, and on the same note, the Democrats are more extreme. But I have a young Democrat in Florida interested. He couldn't come this week, so they're out there, but it's not post-Bernie time. It's very different now, much more polarized. But I have a video that I put together for our ending song. It's your friend David Rovix, and this is his song, Kill the Messenger, and I just made a little slideshow with it. So we will go out with this, and if I want to make sure you guys have a exchange contact or whatever, I'm sure you can do that. You Laurel and Jose probably.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd like
Twitter. Do you guys want to I don't know, tell your Twitter or tell people where to find you, I guess. And
I have a website, www.truthtribunal.org, and I'm on Facebook. That's me.
And Jose and Phil?
Yeah, people can go on my website, votevega.nyc. People will soon be able to download my stickers, my PDF, and then you can put them up wherever you are in the country. I mean, we're trying to get 100,000 of these up in the Bronx. So if people want to donate or be on the ground to put them up, please do, and join me in my fight for guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare. And, I think whether you're in California or whether you're this really smart scientist that I know in Boston, you should speak up no matter where you are in the country. And, and I like my campaign idea, the truth defies silence. So, that's
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
That's not a slogan, though, right? That's not a slogan.
It's an idea.
Well, I can be found at andersonforussenate.com. And for any of your listeners who found this broadcast from Twitter, I was tagged in this. So it's at the number 4, Phil, WI. I can be found on Twitter, too. And
okay.
I'm glad that we're all on together because we need to work together. One of the stories of Ann's success in Milwaukee was that they got their resolution to support HR 934 passed by allying with the folks who were there passing a resolution for peace in Gaza and Ukraine, and they worked together. So that's why we all an example of how we all need to work together too for the things that we believe in together.
Yes, thank you for remembering the details on that. Okay, so here's this song by David Rovix. It's really good.
Peace, everyone.
Whistle back in 2006 was a matter of a password and a couple of clicks to safely send files and protect the source while sharing all the important bits, of course. With a database that's searchable all around the earth that exposed the rich and powerful, showed us what they're worth, showed us the corrupt ways they run affairs. From Iceland to the Indies to almost everywhere, making clothes transparent on emperors all round, everywhere that whistleblowers are to be found. WikiLeaks was too effective, it had to be beaten out. Let there be no doubt. Now they want to kill the messenger while most of us stand by, just waiting for this prisoner to die. Ellsberg blew the whistle on war crimes. He called out for someone to step up this time. With WikiLeaks' assistance, when Chelsea Manning did on torture and mass murder, she blew the lid. And the war on WikiLeaks went into overdrive as the authorities tried hard to make sure it couldn't survive. Now they want to kill the messenger while most of us stand by, just waiting for this prisoner to die. With charges plus The Espionage Act is being used against Assange under the Extradition Pact. Not just Republican war criminals, but Democrats too had it out for him now for telling what he knew. When the DNC rigged the race, got Clinton the nomination, put Sanders in his place. Now they want to kill the messenger while most of us stand by, just waiting for this prisoner to die. Now they'll call him a foreign agent, say he should be shot. They'll call him a narcissist, whatever defamation they got. They'll say he's not a journalist, unlike the ones in Moscow, reporting on the criminals that we allow reporters to report on. We give them the Nobel, while this Australian is caged and sent to hell. Now they want to kill the messenger while most of us stand by, just waiting for this prisoner to die. Now they want to kill the messenger while most of us stand by, just waiting for this prisoner to die.